Hey guys, I figured we'd do something different today and talk about this iceberg meme. So I actually made this one myself, and it's about California. If you're not from California, or even if you are, some of the stuff you may not know, other stuff you might, but I figured it'd be cool to talk about this and just to go deeper and deeper into California. As any iceberg video, the stuff may get more disturbing the further down we go, so just a warning ahead of time. But with that being said, I figure we can dive into this meme and see how it goes. High-speed rail is a publicly funded high-speed rail system that's currently under construction in the state of California. It was proposed by Governor Pete Wilson in 1996 and approved by voters in 2008. The project has been very controversial due to its route, management, delays in construction, the high cost, and inadequate funding. In March 2023, concerns were raised about the project's continued viability, and Governor Gavin Newsom has since said the project will be suspended indefinitely, with the current route from Bakersfield to Merced estimated to be completed by the year 2029. Silicon Valley is a region in the San Francisco Bay Area, home to many of the world's largest high-tech corporations, including Apple, Meta, YouTube, and others. Silicon Valley is also home to 30 businesses in the Fortune 1000 and thousands of startup companies. Silicon Valley gets its name due to many silicon-based computer parts, such as the microprocessor and the microcomputer, were developed in the region, giving it the nickname of Silicon Valley. The area is anchored by California's third-largest city, San Jose, which is home to almost 1 million people, and other wealthy cities such as Cupertino, Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara, just to name a few. The area has one of the highest housing costs in California and the U.S., and homelessness remains a big problem for the region. It's somewhat sad to see so much wealth coexist with so much poverty in the same place. I included this graph I found online showing housing prices in San Mateo County, one of the counties in Silicon Valley, and you can see it peaked at about $2.4 million a house, and it's gone down to about $1.6 million in 2023, which is still outrageous in my opinion, but it's at least gone down substantially. The San Andreas Fault is California's most famous, or infamous, earthquake fault. Located on the west coast of the state for most of its duration, the San Andreas Fault is the borderline between the Pacific Plate to the west and North American Plate to the east. It is a slip fault, which means that the Pacific Plate is moving north, while the North American Plate is moving south. This is what causes the earthquakes to occur on the fault. The fault has been responsible for numerous major earthquakes in California's history, most notable the Fort Tejon earthquake in 1857, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, another earthquake in San Francisco in 1957, another earthquake in 1989, and an earthquake in Parkfield in 2004. Most earthquakes that occur in California are small enough not to be felt, and big ones are actually quite rare. For a long time, scientists have been saying that California is overdue for the big one, the next big earthquake, which could destroy most of the state. The 2015 movie San Andreas, starring Dwayne Johnson, does portray what would happen if the state were to be hit by a 10.0 earthquake. Although this is unlikely to happen, it would cause untold devastation and death. Although no one knows how much damage would occur due to a 10.0 earthquake, the largest earthquake in California's history was the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, as pictured here. It was a 7.9 on the Richter scale and killed over 3,000 people, so one can only imagine how much devastation would occur if an earthquake of a 10 or higher were to strike the state. California City is a city located in northeastern Kern County, not too far from where I live. The city has around 15,000 people, yet it is the third largest city in California by land area. The city was founded in 1958 as the brainchild of Smith & Williams and Garrett Ekbo Architecture. This company wanted to make the next Los Angeles for California, a new major city. The problem is that unlike Los Angeles, California City is located in the high desert of the Mojave and has a very hot and unbearable climate for most of the year, as well as having no adequate water supply. In 1969, the Federal Trade Commission began to inspect the lands, and by 1971 had deemed that the land had been a failure. In 1977, over 14,000 landowners received partial refunds for their investments. The developers were also given a cease and desist order, and California City remained an empty, isolate place. Here is a map of present-day California City. As you can see, there really isn't much there. Most of the roads you see are actually empty. There aren't any houses. There's empty lots. There's a golf course and a hotel and a few businesses. But other than that, California City is relatively deserted. I myself have been to California City many times, and it's pretty much just a place where people go to get away from society. There's a lot of open space, a lot of open property, a great place for ATVing, and for hiding stuff. To put it in layman's terms, a lot of desert people live out here, and it's a great place to do unspeakable things if you don't want to get caught. The state of Jefferson is a secession movement of several Northern California and Southern Oregon counties to form the 51st state of the U.S., the state of Jefferson. This was first proposed in October of 1941, but was put on hold due to the outbreak of World War II that year. However, beginning in 2013, movements were revitalized to make the state of Jefferson happen when Siskiyou County, on the extreme northern border of California, voted to secede from California. Numerous other counties followed suit, and soon a proposed map was released of the state of Jefferson. Here is the latest map of the proposed state of Jefferson. As you can see, it has many more counties included. The counties in dark green have voted to secede, while the counties in light green are forming secession committees. The size of Jefferson has grown greatly ever since that first 2016 map was released. One of the biggest reasons for people wanting to create a new state is taxation without representation. Once you drive north of Sacramento in California or drive south of Eugene in Oregon, you will see that there are very few people and it is very economically deprived, to say the least. Therefore, there's always been an envy of the more wealthy and represented cities of each respective state. However, it isn't only a matter of taxes. Many counties in California, like Mendocino and Humboldt, have long wanted to have their own marijuana industry, long before California ever legalized marijuana. This caused counties that were both blue and red in the proposed state of Jefferson to agree to secede and form their own state where everybody could be happy in their own respective wants and desires on both sides. Here is a map of how each county in the state of Jefferson would have voted in the 2016 election. As you can see, Jefferson would be a strongly Republican state by these counties. There is some Democratic support on the coast. The darkest blue county in the southwest corner right there is Mendocino County, where most of the marijuana industry would be. But as a whole, the state would be very Republican. The state of Jefferson has always been a controversial idea, not only because it would take land from two already existing states and create a whole new state for people to live in. The areas of the state are not economically prosperous, as mentioned previously. They are largely based on agriculture and dairy and farming, so there would not really be a big economic base to fall onto, so the state would possibly be very heavily reliant on government subsidies, which would not be with much delight to the new residents of the state who wanted to leave the oppressive burdens of their states, to then have to rely on the federal government for money. General Sherman is a gigantic sequoia tree located in Sequoia National Park in Central California. By volume, it is the largest known living single-stem tree on Earth. It is estimated to be almost 2,700 years old. The tree is also incredibly tall. It stands at a height of 83 meters or 275 feet. As you can see, it's quite a big tree here. Here I am actually taking a selfie right by it. It's pretty tall. You might be able to tell by the angle, but I was actually taking a selfie straight up. That's how tall it is. The road to get there is absolutely horrendous. It's an extremely windy road, probably one of the windiest roads I've ever been on in my entire life. In fact, it's so bad. On the way up, I got car sick, and I never get car sick. In fact, I've never gotten car sick in my entire life. That being said, it was a very beautiful drive, and there were also a lot of European tourists visiting. I've noticed that about many national parks here. And I think that's really cool, how they come so far to see parks that we live right by. I live within 2 hours of Sequoia National Park, and we don't really think too much about it most of the time. There's also a long line to take this picture of General Sherman, just be aware, but it's not too bad. Freeway stubs refer to uncompleted freeways all around California, and if you've ever been to a California city like Los Angeles or San Francisco, you're bound to run into a few of them. These freeway stubs are either results of community opposition, like this freeway right here in Los Angeles, Interstate 710, Interstate 710 is one of the more controversial canceled freeway projects in Los Angeles due to the fact that most of it was built through low-income neighborhoods. However, the part that ends right here was canceled through the very wealthy city of South Pasadena, which was very opposed to the idea of a freeway going through their neighborhood. The whole not in my backyard people. Here's a proposed map of the freeways in Los Angeles that were originally meant to be built. The ones in red are all the proposed ones, and the ones in gray have already been built. As you can see, there are many canceled freeways throughout the area. The freeways that weren't stopped due to local opposition were stopped in the 1970s when Governor at the time, Jerry Brown, opposed all freeways from being built in the state. With the exception of interstate highways, all state and U.S. highways that were to be built into freeways were canceled. This is why you see so many freeways that go nowhere in California. My own hometown of Bakersfield has a canceled freeway, California 58, but the map right here shows the proposed route, which is almost completed. So the 58 will soon be an uncanceled freeway, to put it in terms like that. However, this project was steeped in controversy, as I could spend a whole other video talking about it. But to put it in this video, I'll just say the project has run out of money several times, the date for completion has been pushed back many times, and as of July 2023, it is still under construction with no end in sight. Not to give too off topic, but this almost makes it worse. You have to not only destroy a neighborhood, but then you don't build the project in time. It just adds insult to injury, makes everybody else mad. But I digress on this topic. The French Laundry is a 3 Michelin star-rated French and California cuisine restaurant located in Napa Valley, California. It was founded in 1978, and its current chef and owner is Thomas Keller. This restaurant is one of the most exclusive and high-end restaurants in the entire state. It's extremely hard to get a table, and the prices are, let's say they're high enough to make market price blush on a menu. It's a very exclusive restaurant. The restaurant gained infamy in November 2020 when the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, after issuing a stay-at-home order and telling people not to eat in restaurants, he was caught eating at the restaurant indoors without wearing a mask at a gathering larger than 10 people, which violated all of his COVID social distancing guidelines. Although he initially denied reports of being at the restaurant, then changed the story to say he was eating at the restaurant but was eating outside social distancing, this photo arose and caused mass outrage among Californians who were stuck at home during a pandemic, while their governor was eating out at a restaurant most of the state can't even afford to eat at. Reports said that bills of the alcohol the group drank was tens of thousands of dollars. This photo is directly credited with sparking outrage that led to the recall election the following year. Although Newsom would survive the election, this definitely was a massive turning point in politics in California. Now, I'm not really faulting the restaurant for doing this. They were just trying to make a living. Even if most of their clients are extremely wealthy, they were still suffering during the pandemic. Let's be honest, politicians from both sides do bad stuff. But that is a story for another video. Peter Hardeman Burnett was California's first governor, serving from December 1849 prior to resigning in January 1851. He is California's first and so far only governor to resign while in office. Burnett was originally from Missouri and moved out west to spread slavery to Oregon country. He was elected to the Provisional Government of Oregon and enacted an infamous law called Burnett's Lash Law that authorized the flogging of any free blacks found who refused to leave Oregon. The law was deemed harsh, and the voters rescinded it in 1845. In 1848, Burnett moved to California during the Gold Rush and reestablished his political career by being appointed to the California Supreme Court. Though Burnett had 2 enslaved people of his own, he opposed California becoming a slave state, instead wanting to ban all African Americans from California entirely. As governor, he signed the Act for Government and Protection of Indians, which enslaved Native Americans and contributed to a mass genocide against them. In 1851, he declared a war to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct and must be expelled. He was also known for being an early proponent for exclusion of Chinese immigrant laborers from California. Following his term as governor, this would lead to the federal government introducing a federal Chinese Exclusion Act. Being from California, I myself didn't know about him until I researched our governors. He is not widely remembered, and he is probably the least consequential governor of California. and virtually nothing is named after him. If anything was, it has most likely been renamed by now. Manzanar was a Japanese internment camp during World War II, which was located in Inyo County in the high desert near the City of Independence. Manzanar was established for the internment of Japanese Americans during the war due to many questioning their loyalty to America and possible dual loyalty to the Empire of Japan. And as many as 10,000 Japanese Americans and their families were uprooted from their homes and sent to live in this camp. Conditions at the camp were described as brutal and substandard due to the extreme temperatures of the high desert and being far away from anything that these individuals and their families ever knew, as most Japanese Americans at the time lived in coastal cities, and this was hundreds of miles away from their homes. Diseases spread very quickly in these camps, and as many as 150 people died during their time at the camp, although some people did die of old age. In 1942, a riot broke out and 2 internees were killed. Despite the hardships endured, the internees gradually turned their concentration camp into a community by spending their days creating beautiful things like crafts and textiles. The camp closed after World War II and the Japanese were turned back to their communities. The camp still stands to this day, and it is a popular tourist destination to remember at a time when America turned a blind eye to civil liberties and freedom. In my opinion, Japanese internment was one of our government's worst violations of civil liberties in our history, excluding slavery, of course. I've driven by Manzanar. I haven't had the chance to visit, but I would like to visit sometime, and I'm very glad that we keep these camps around, just like Germany keeps their camps around, to never forget. Harvey Milk was an American politician who is the first openly gay elected politician in California, elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Although he grew up conservative, during the 1960s counterculture movement, he embraced his sexuality and began to be more open about it, helping change people's opinions around him and in the community of San Francisco. Milk served almost 11 months in office, during which he sponsored bills to ban discrimination in public accommodations, and these bills were passed, signed into law by Mayor at the time George Moscone. On November 27, 1978, Harvey Milk and George Moscone were both assassinated by Dan White, a disgruntled former city supervisor who cast the sole vote against Milk's discrimination bill. Despite his short career in politics, Milk became an icon in San Francisco and a martyr in the LGBT community. In 2002, Milk was called the most famous and most significant openly LGBT official ever elected in the U.S. In 2009, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The Salton Sea is a shallow, landlocked, highly saline body of water in Riverside and Imperial counties at the southern end of California. It lies on the San Andreas Fault. The current body of water was formed from an inflow of water from the Colorado River in 1905. In the 1950s and 60s, it became a major resort destination with vacation homes and communities sprouting up. Beginning in the 1980s, runoff from nearby farms caused massive disease and death among the local fish and other aquatic species. Beginning in the late 1990s, the lake began to shrink as local agriculture used the water more efficiently. As the lake bed became more dried up, the wind sent toxic clouds of dust into nearby communities. The water is considered very toxic and dangerous to swim in nowadays, and the Salton Sea is often referred to as California's biggest environmental disaster in its entire history. The Donner Party was a group of American pioneers who migrated to California from Missouri in a wagon train. Delayed by a multitude of missteps, they spent the winter of 1846 to 1847 snowbound in the Sierra Nevada mountains near the present-day town of Truckee, California. Due to the cold and loss of food, many of the migrants resorted to cannibalism to survive. There were originally 87 members and only 48 survived the ordeal. Historians have described it as one of the most fascinating tragedies in California's history and in the entire record of American westward migration. The area near where the settlers died is now named Donner Pass on Interstate 80. The interstate frequently shuts down in the winter due to very heavy snowfall. Patty Hearst is the granddaughter of newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. In 1974, 19-year-old Patty was kidnapped by the left-wing Symbionese Liberation Army from her apartment in Berkeley, California. Hearst was kidnapped due to the fact that she lived right by the SLA's hideout, and also because they wanted the Hearst family to help free other SLA members convicted of a 1973 murder in Oakland, California. The SLA and Patty Hearst carried out a series of bank robberies in 1974 throughout California, most notably in San Francisco and Inglewood, California. Hearst and her abductors were also have known to make improvised explosive devices and also hijacked many cars. In September 1975, Patty was arrested with other SLA members in San Francisco. She had lost a significant amount of weight, and a psychologist described her as a low IQ, low effect zombie, although doctors did measure her IQ afterwards at 112, which was a drop from her previous 130 measurement. She had become a heavy chain smoker and suffered from frequent nightmares due to her ordeal, although she had no memory of some of the aspects of her time in the SLA. Although her IQ did drop, she was still deemed mentally competent and responsible for the crimes she had committed. In 1976, the trial ensued, and Hearst had claimed that she had been brainwashed by her captors and she only acted because she was threatened with death by her captors. However, this was not persuasive to the jury. On March 20th, 1976, Hearst was convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm. She was given the maximum sentence of 35 years of imprisonment. However, she would only serve a short prison time, as President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence in 1979 with time served. She would receive a full and complete pardon from President Bill Clinton in January 20th, 2001, his last day in office. 2 months after she was released from prison in 1979, she married Bernard Lee Shaw, a policeman who was part of her security detail during the time of her bail. They had 2 children together, and Patty is still alive today and does charity work for AIDS and other fundraising activities. So Patty, if you're watching this, I hope you're okay and everything's good. Aeromexico Flight 498, or the Cerritos plane crash, was a flight scheduled from Mexico City to Los Angeles, California on April 31st, 1986. The plane was over the suburban city of Cerritos, just southeast of Los Angeles, and east of the LAX airport. The plane was very close to its destination when a small Cherokee plane collided with the Aeromexico flight, killing all 64 people on the Aeromexico flight, the 3 people on the ground, and as the plane came crashing down into the city of Cerritos, 15 people on the ground were killed as well. The crash investigation determined that the Aeromexico flight was not at fault for the resulting crash. Rooftop Koreans refer to various Korean business owners in Los Angeles that defended their properties from rioters during the 1992 Rodney King riots in the city. The riots were caused by the police beating of Rodney King, an African-American man who was caught driving recklessly through the streets of Los Angeles high on drugs. The police beat him severely, almost to the point where Rodney King died. The police officers were found not guilty of aggravated assault and excessive force, and various riots broke out across the city. Most of the riots were concentrated in central Los Angeles, near a lot of Korean businesses. Due to fear that the rioters would burn down their businesses, the Koreans armed themselves with machine guns to defend their properties. It is widely believed that since South Korea has mandatory military service for men, this was why so many Korean business owners had access to machine guns. Hinckley is a small desert community located west of Barstow, California in the Mojave Desert. It is also home to the largest hexavalent chromium contamination in the entire world. From 1952 to 1966, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, or PG&E, dumped hexavalent chromium into the groundwater supply near the town of Hinckley. It is estimated that PG&E dumped around 370 million gallons of chromium-tainted wastewater into the water supply in the town of Hinckley. This led to a class action lawsuit being filed against PG&E. In 1996, the case was settled for $333 million, the largest settlement ever paid in a direct action lawsuit in the U.S. history. In 2006, PG&E agreed to pay $295 million to settle another hexavalent chromium outbreak. And in case you're wondering, this event spawned the 2000 blockbuster hit Erin Brockovich starring Julia Roberts, which is pretty close to the actual true story. It's also a very good movie. I highly recommend you watch it. It's just very compelling what happened to the people in this small town. I won't get into all the details here, but basically, PG&E is a bad corporation. but I highly recommend you watch this movie. I think you will really like it and it will blow you away by what happened. Hey everyone, so we're moving on to levels 5 and 6 now. The content's going to get a little bit more disturbing, so just be warned, it's going to get pretty dark. The Zodiac Killer is a pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. The case has been described as the most famous unsolved murder case in American history. The Zodiac Killer murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. His known attacks took place in cities and unincorporated areas like Benicia, Vallejo, and San Francisco. 2 of the Zodiac Killer's victims survived, and the Zodiac Killer took credit for 37 murders across California. The Zodiac Killer coined his name because he wrote a series of taunting letters and cards that he mailed to newspapers, in which he threatened killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed. Some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers in which the killer claimed he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. He produced 4 ciphers in total. 2 remain unsolved, and 1 was cracked recently in 2020. There have been several theories of the identity of the Zodiac Killer. The only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former school teacher who was a convicted sex offender who died in 1992. The Zodiac Killer ceased communication in 1974. Although several police departments in California have kept an open case file since 1969, including the California Department of Justice. Gerald Ford was the 38th President of the United States, serving from 1974 to 1977. In the month of September 1975, Gerald Ford survived 2 assassination attempts in California. The first attempt was in Sacramento, committed by Lynn Fromm, a follower of Charles Manson and his infamous cult. Fromm's motivation was to set an example for people and companies who refused to halt environmental pollution. Just 17 days later, Ford survived yet another assassination attempt in San Francisco, this time perpetrated by Sarah Jane Moore, a former FBI informant and a woman who was obsessed with the kidnapping of Patty Hearst. Remember her from the previous entry? Ford was rescued by a retired Marine, Oliver Sipple, who was thrown into the spotlight afterward and outed as a member of the gay community in San Francisco to his family. Sipple was friends with Harvey Milk, another person from an earlier entry in this video. Ford later went on to thank Sipple for his help in saving his life. Although Sipple was not used to the fame and newfound attention from this community, his own mother outed him, and reporters labeled him as a gay ex-Marine. He later committed suicide in 1989 by alcoholism. Before he died, he said he regretted saving President Ford's life and all the attention it brought him, but that is a topic for another video. I know President Ford has long died, but I feel bad that he faced 2 assassination attempts in 1 month in California. On December 2nd, 2015, a mass shooting and attempted bombing occurred in San Bernardino, California. The shooting was carried out by Saeed Rizwan Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, a married couple living in the city of Redlands. They targeted a Christmas party at a San Bernardino County Department of Public Health training event. 14 people were killed and 22 were seriously wounded. After the shooting, the couple fled in a rented SUV and 4 hours later were shot and killed by police. Some of the more disturbing aspects of the shooting were the fact that the couple's neighbor, Enrique Marquez Jr., was investigated for helping to buy and provide the rifles to the couple. The husband's brother was also arrested for immigration fraud because the wife was from Pakistan on a green card, and their marriage was seen as a sham. This was the deadliest mass shooting since the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012 and was later surpassed by the Orlando shooting in 2016. The 2018 Camp Fire was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire to hit California. The Camp Fire caused at least 85 civilian fatalities and injured 12 civilians and firefighters. The fire was sparked by downed power lines from Pacific Gas and Electric, or PG&E, which combined with high winds caused the fire to massively spread and destroyed the mountain community of Paradise, with almost 95% of its structures being completely destroyed by the fire. By January 2019, the total damage was estimated to be at over $16 billion. PG&E filed bankruptcy that month, and in December 2019 settled for $13.5 billion for wildfire victims. In 2020, the utility pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. A disturbing footnote is that the power lines that caused the fire were from the 1920s, and PG&E has been severely criticized for not updating its equipment. And the fact that this is not the first time PG&E shows up in this video is very disturbing. To be honest, I could do a whole video about PG&E. If they aren't price gouging their customers, they're either poisoning them or burning them in a fire. We've now made it to level 6, the most disturbing of all the levels of the Iceberg video. Be warned, the next 2 entries might be considered very graphic and disturbing to some viewers, so you have been warned. If you are claustrophobic, you might want to skip the next entry. On July 15th, 1976, a school bus was driving from a school field trip near the town of Chowchilla, California, when a van blocked the road the bus was on. 3 armed men got out of the van and at gunpoint forced the bus to drive around for 11 hours until finally stopping near a quarry in the town of Livermore, California. The kidnappers forced the children and the bus driver into the quarry, into an abandoned food truck stocked with food and mattresses, in the dark. The children were able to escape by stacking the mattresses on top of each other and climbing out and getting help. Here's what the inside of that van looked like. The quarry owner's son and 2 of his friends were named as the 3 prime suspects. The quarry owner's son fled to Canada and was arrested in Vancouver. His 2 friends were arrested in the Bay Area after one of them turned themselves in. The kidnappers made the disturbing omission that they kidnapped children to get money for ransom because they said children were precious. All 3 of the men were found guilty of kidnapping for ransom and robbery. All 3 men were tried and found guilty and sentenced to between 36 and 46 years of prison between them. Although a disturbing footnote is that their conviction was overturned due to the injury the children sustained was deemed not sufficient enough by the court. This, of course, caused massive outrage, and they were resentenced to life with the possibility of parole. One of the men was released from prison in 2012, and another was freed in 2015. In August 2022, the last of the perpetrators was freed from prison. All 3 of the men are alive today. Although no one was killed, many of the survivors have claimed severe psychological damage, including one of the ladies who was unable to sleep ever since the incident, due to her fear of the dark. Scott and Lacey Peterson were a married couple who lived in Modesto, California. Scott was a fertilizer salesman and Lacey was a part-time school teacher. On Christmas Eve 2002, Scott strangled and killed Lacey, who was pregnant with her 7-month-old baby at the time. He drove her body to the San Francisco Bay and dumped her off the Berkeley Marina, a place where he liked to go fishing in his free time. Lacey was reported missing, and various search crews searched throughout the city of Modesto and surrounding areas for Lacey, although they would not find her until months later. In April 2003, a couple was walking their dog near the town of Richmond by the San Francisco Bay, where they found a decomposing but intact body of a fetus. The very next day, a decomposed body washed up near the city of Berkeley. It was so decomposed that no one could identify it, although authorities did see that it was decapitated and its arms and legs had been cut off. Authorities later confirmed that the body belonged to Lacey and the fetus was her son. Later that week, authorities arrested Scott as he was near San Diego, California. His car had tens of thousands of dollars of cash, prescription medicine, and bottles, and he had dyed his hair blonde. Many people believed he was trying to flee to Mexico, although Scott denied this, saying he was living out of his car at the time. During the trial, it was revealed that Scott and Lacey were not in fact a happily married couple. Scott had been cheating on Lacey with a co-worker, Amber, and Lacey found out about this and threatened to divorce Scott and take sole custody of their unborn son and ruin him. Scott was seen as a respected member of the community, and he feared for his future. He wanted to start a new life without Lacey, with his lover, Amber, although Amber did not want to start a life with him. So much so that Amber even testified against Scott during the trial. On November 12, 2004, the jury convicted Scott, and he was sentenced to death for the murder of his wife and unborn son. He was also ordered to pay $10,000 for Lacey's funeral. Scott had taken out a life insurance policy after he killed Lacey, and the judge ordered him to send all the money towards Lacey's family. Scott sat on death row until 2020, when his death sentence was overturned after California set a moratorium on executions. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Scott has maintained his innocence this entire time. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case, in my opinion, is the fact that after he killed Lacey, Scott helped participate in searches for Lacey across Modesto, saying to her family that he loved her and he wanted to find her as much as they did. Scott is arguably one of the most hated men in California's history. Well, you've made it to the end of the Iceberg video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. And thank you.